300 and counting. As the death toll in Sri Lanka's suicide attacks mounts, many questions as to the larger aims behind this attack. Welcome to SNI, I am Surya Gangadharan, and I have with me Nitin Gokhale to discuss some of the issues arising from these Sri Lanka attacks. Nitin, what do you make of it?
Well, I think it's a very intriguing kind of an attack because the targets obviously were the Christians on Easter Sunday, churches and luxury hotels in Colombo, foreign tourists. I think last count was about 27 or 30 of them between that count, foreign tourists. The group now that has been officially named as responsible for it is a Sri Lankan Muslim organization, Islamic organization called Tawheed, National Tawheed Jamaat, and which is known to be a radical hardline organization. But to expect or to even think that that organization will have such a organizing capability is something which is beyond anybody's imagination. And I think the whole country there, I've been speaking to some friends and some people in the establishment, they're all in a shock. They have not been able to comprehend why this has happened, what was the motive, and who must have masterminded this.
This Tawheed Jamaat is not very well known, and the point is it linked to any outside group? Is there anything that you're getting?
Well, I spoke to a couple of people who have been in military intelligence and police CID work. They have been watching this group for about 5 to 6 years since 2010, post the end of civil war in 2009. There have been clashes between majority Buddhists and the Muslim groups in Sri Lanka's east, especially, and sometimes in Colombo itself. Now, this group had become little more hardline and radicalized. They were known to have defaced some Buddhist temples, statues, but there was no, at least outwardly, there was no indication that this had become a hardline terrorist group. But a couple of other inputs from Sri Lankan intelligence is that in 2015-16, they had got inputs that some of these members of the Tawheed Jamaat had actually travelled to Syria. And that's when they lost the track or lost the kind of watch that they were keeping on some of these hardliners in that group. And suddenly then this comes back after 4 years. So the suspicion is that the mastermind and the organizers of these 8 near simultaneous blasts or a serial kind of blast and suicide bombers. 8 suicide bombers is unheard of, at least in my, very unusual in my experience. I have not heard 8 suicide bombers coming and doing it simultaneously, the blast and the kind of attacks that they did. That they had travelled to Syria, had got further radicalized and had come back. That's the initial input, and I think the government has finally named them after 24 hours that this group is responsible. We'll have to wait and watch whether there were any other linkages with IS or Daesh or any other groups in the region itself.
It's curious that no Buddhist center, temple or groups were targeted. Although logically you would assume that those groups would be in their line of sight,
Well, it could be on their radar in the larger scheme of things, but going by one theory, which is again a theory which has not been confirmed, is that this was an attack or this was an act in as a revenge for the Christchurch mosque attack, and therefore the Buddhists were not on the radar. And I think the second point, which I am sort of speculating, is that the Buddhists are in overwhelming majority in Sri Lanka, and I think they wanted to, whoever the perpetrators, they wanted to avoid a backlash against minority Muslims. They constitute just 10% of the population of Sri Lanka. Christians are further low in numbers in Sri Lanka. They're just 7% of the population, and therefore I think they thought that this is an easier target perhaps, and so therefore the targets, the locations were chosen very carefully.
Now, some of the reports I've read suggest that India had given them some intelligence, but it appears nobody acted on it, or perhaps the holiday season or whatever, it was overlooked.
Yeah, that's now it's coming out that I think the dissonance between the president and the prime minister the divide in the government, the forced kind of union that is there right now governing Sri Lanka would have played some part in the kind of lackadaisical follow-up on the input that was given by RNAW, India's external spying agency. This was apparently the input was given that churches and luxury hotels are on the radar or are being targeted by this group. This was given. This input was given on 10th or 11th of April, and a police officer apparently sent out an advisory to hotels and churches in a routine manner. And it appears from what the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe said yesterday on Sunday, on the day of the attack, and today what have appeared, or the reports that have appeared, it appears that the Prime Minister was not in the know about this, or some ministers were not in the know, because the hint is that law and order defense is with the President, President Maithripala Sirisena. And he was out of the country on a pilgrimage or on a personal holiday. The Prime Minister himself was not in Colombo, he was in Bentota. Not that he cannot travel, Bentota is just 2 hours from Colombo. So overall, as we see, the directionless government that is there in Colombo post the political crisis in December, January, must have contributed to this kind of lackadaisical approach to the very hard intelligence that was available to the police and to the other authorities.
Now, this whole thing about this attack being retaliation for what happened at Christchurch in New Zealand, it suggests that there is something strange which is now working in the minds of terrorists, that it doesn't really matter where an attack happened, they'll hit anywhere they want, wherever they want.
Looks like, because the lone wolf attack on the mosque by a right winger who was an Australian, he went to New Zealand and attacked people in the mosque there, the Muslims praying in the mosque there. Here, it seems so far at least the Sri Lankan government is saying all 8 suicide bombers and attackers were locals. Now, we still don't have an idea whether there were linkages with ISIS or Daesh outside. But you're right that the fragmentation of the old central organization like the Al-Qaeda or Daesh seems to be completely vanishing now, and there are franchises which are appearing, being all over. And one of the fallouts which I fear is also that India has so far managed to put a lid on ISIS and or their proponents. But are we sure that that is completely under the control of the law enforcement agencies? We still don't know. So that's one danger that we are facing.
In fact, that was going to be my last question.
Okay.
Anyhow, let me add one more. When you look at attacks of this kind, does it suggest that there is a certain information exchange, a regular process of information exchange which goes on between Sri Lanka and India, perhaps even with the Maldives, because again you have so many Maldivians who have gone to fight on behalf of ISIS.
Oh, it does. There's a lot of exchange. In fact, Maldivians, I think, have the highest per capita contribution to ISIS, or had at one point in time. And so therefore this region is full of these possibilities, or full of these likelihood of such attacks. And lone wolf attacks are also on the radar, are also possible. And therefore I think the constant exchange of hard intelligence, actionable intelligence, is extremely important. I think there will be stepped up efforts between Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Maldives, certainly, because this is a danger that is not confined to one country or to just Sri Lanka, although it has suffered massively. And let me add that this is such a tragic sort of turn of events, because exactly 10 years ago, in April 2009, the civil war between the Sri Lankan government forces and LTTE was winding down. In fact, the war ended on 18th of May 2009. And for 10 years, Sri Lankans had uninterrupted peace. It was a country which was enjoying itself. It was coming out of the scars of 30 years of civil war, getting normal, and then suddenly you have this. This, I think, is going to be a much longer process to come out and become normal, because this is shaken up everyone.
Last question. There is a Tawheed Jamaat also in Tamil Nadu. So would it be far-fetched to apply some kind of a link here between?
I think so far, yes, they're far-fetched, but I mean, we've seen in the time of the Tamil insurgency in Sri Lanka that they had all the backing, their basis, their ideology, their inspiration was in Tamil Nadu. So you can't really rule it out, because these linkages are ancient. Maldivians have a linkage to Kerala. Sri Lankans have a linkage to India at various places, not just the Buddhists but the Tamils, the Muslims of Sri Lanka. So you don't know really, and that I think makes the job of the law enforcement agencies much more complicated and harder in coming days. So we can only pray that this doesn't get repeated anywhere else.
And the Sri Lankans pay more heed to intelligence.
Pay more heed to intelligence, and I think one element that we didn't discuss, or we really can't discuss here, but the clamor among the majority Sinalis will be to have a stronger, stable government in coming months when they have elections coming up either end of this year or early next year.
So Lehel Rajapaksa?
Well, he would hope to, but again, we don't know how it turns out, because last time they think, the Rajapaksas think that the election was stolen from them. So we don't know whether it is still, they have that kind of popularity, or they would want to whip up that kind of sentiment. But certainly people will yearn for what Mahinda Rajapaksa was, a strong man, a hardliner, and his brother Gotabaya, who was a hardline defense secretary, who actually cleaned up Colombo and had full control over the law and order in the country. I mean, you can debate on the methods, or you can debate on the way it was done, but the fact is that brought back Sri Lanka to normal, and now here you have such an event where 300 plus people have been massacred, innocents have been massacred.
On that note, Nitin, thank you.
Welcome.